Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Hockey Podcast, another episode of the Hockey Podcast. It is I, Kevin Olenick. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at KEVOLE, Soundcloud.com, KEVOLE. You are listening to this as well on Spreaker, KEVOLE. Like the Hockey Podcast on Facebook. Add me as a friend on Facebook as well, Kevin Olenick. Talking hockey in the summer. And this episode is just myself. Typically we have guests that we have, but today I am flying solo today. Going to talk about a number of interesting stories and developments that have happened the last few days in the hockey world, and kind of give you my take on them. It's been a very interesting summer in that. Usually it's kind of the downtime of the hockey season, but there has been some really interesting stuff that has happened. There's also been some interesting stuff that hasn't happened, but we'll get into that today. Number of different topics that we're going to talk about. We have about 7 different things I want to get into today that we'll talk about. So it includes a buyout, a letter, a Hall of Fame player, a prospect being compared to Bobby Orr, and a soap opera that just simply needs to die, as well as a big trade between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Buffalo Sabres. So let's get started. So the Calgary Flames this week, Flames fans have been in unity this week, united in celebration and reflection and in memory. Earlier this week, Jarome Iginla, of course, on Monday, held his press conference announcing officially his retirement to the National Hockey League from the National Hockey League. It was an incredible display. Legend Peter Marr was the MC. We had Craig Conroy, Martin Jelena, and a number of other people speaking at the event. And then Iginla took the time to thank the fans and the players and his impact, and it was a really well done press conference. And of course, Connor Turner and I did a podcast discussing the memories of Jarome Iginla and doing a reflection. You can check that out on Spreaker.com, KEVOLE. So there was unity for that, and also the Flame fans had another reason to celebrate and in unity, as Troy Brouwer has been officially bought out this week by the Calgary Flames. Troy Brouwer has been known for that memorable play that he did that one time. No, that wasn't him. That time he scored that goal in that big game. No, that also wasn't him. He made a... No. To call Troy Brouwer's career in Calgary tension-filled and a bit concerning is being diplomatic. Troy Brouwer, I'm sure, and people have said this, is probably a very wonderful human being that has brought in some terms of intangibles and things like that. But his time in Calgary, unfortunately, didn't work. He was signed for a very large 4-year, basically $18 million hit. His career in Calgary, and this is 2 seasons, 19 goals, 28 assists, 47 points. He was basically being paid close to $1 million a goal for his time in Calgary. Minus 11, minus 7, so you can't necessarily even argue he made a defensive impact. A very unfortunate time for Troy Brouwer in Calgary. If you remember earlier in the season, back in December, Glenn Gullickson had a very famous stick-throwing incident, and where he kind of called out the vets and how they performed during the season. It was after a really strong performance against the LA Kings, and he specifically talked about the veterans at that time, and can't help but wonder if Troy Brouwer was part of that. He was at the dismay from many Flames fans because of his salary, which for many people question, and his production, which many people question. But His 19 goals weren't because he didn't have a lack of opportunities. And I'm not talking about shots. I'm talking about him being actually on the power play and the time that he played and wearing an A on his jersey frustrated a number of Flame fans because he didn't produce in that kind of level, unfortunately. And there were other players that didn't get that same opportunity. Garnet Hathaway, maybe. You could argue that. And even looking back at the second half of the season with the Calgary Flames, one of the questions that has came up a number of times has been locker room presence. I don't know where Troy Brouwer was on that, but certainly if you look at what the Calgary Flames have done with the trades, Michael Ferland and Dougie Hamilton earlier in the year, the buyout here, Troy Brouwer, bringing in him a number of new free agents like James Neal, Derek Ryan, Austin Zarnak, and much more. And of course, you got the trade acquisitions of Noah Hannafin and Elias Lindholm. This Flames team is very different. And of course, the change from coach from Glenn Gullickson to Bill Peters. This is a very different team this year. The hot seat is definitely, and the target is definitely on Flames general manager Brad Treliving. And it's going to be very interesting to see what the Calgary Flames are going to be. We have had this conversation a couple of times. And to see, and we don't know. Will they be good? Will they be bad? There certainly will be different. And probably it's good that they will be different, but we will have to see. As far as Troy Brouwer goes, he's been a serviceable player in the NHL. He's 32 years old. I don't know if he's going to get a contract, certainly a contract that he had in Calgary, probably not. I could see him getting a couple of PTO opportunities. I know that St. Louis was a big factor in there, and there were some people in St. Louis that want him. I made a joke on Twitter that the Canucks may sign him because they signed Beagle and Roussel. But he is from this area, so that could be a possibility. I wonder if the Edmonton Oilers, and we'll talk about the Oilers a little bit later, I wonder if the Oilers may give him a PKO. Glenn Gullickson being the head coach, being an assistant coach, maybe he knows something that we don't. Anyway, very interesting to see Troy Brouwer gone. A great ceremony this week for Jerome McGinley, but very interesting week in Flames land. Going to be interesting to see what the Flames bring in the 2018-2019 season. There has been a number of interesting things that has happened over the summer. Of course, we had the John Tavares signing in Toronto. We had that big Calgary Flame Carolina Hurricane trade for Dougie Hamilton, Michael Ferland, for Elias Lindholm, and Noah Hannafin. But there has been a number of things that has not happened. We are still waiting on the Erik Karlsson trade and where he's going to end up. We're still waiting on the Max Pacioretty trade that we thought was going to happen during the draft, but didn't happen at that time. We're still waiting for that. There's been a number of other players that have been on this trade. Justin Falk was on that. A number of other people around the league. But one trade did happen yesterday, finally. Jeff Skinner was traded from the Carolina Hurricanes to the Buffalo Sabres in a deal that saw a prospect by the name of Cliff Pugh and a number of draft picks be traded back to the Carolina Hurricanes. Jeff Skinner is a 30-goal scorer, 3-time 30-goal scorer. He won the Rookie of the Year in 2011. On the Buffalo Sabres depth chart is expected to play with Jack Eichel. And, of course, the Buffalo Sabres are a much different team going into this season than they were last season. Of course, earlier this year, this offseason, they traded Ryan O'Reilly to St. Louis. And they have, let's look at that depth chart right now and see what they have. Because their number one line would be Jack Eichel with Jeff Skinner and Sam Reinhart. Their second line is Casey Middlestat, a high prospect, with Kyle Okposo back. You know, interesting, we didn't get into this that much with Brouwer, but if you remember, there was the Troy Brouwer, Milan Lucic, Louis Eriksson, oversigned, and Kyle Okposo was probably part of that oversign as well. And Connor Sheary, who the Sabres got in a trade for Pittsburgh. You got Patrick Berglund and Vladimir Sobotka got acquired in the Ryan O'Reilly trade with Jason Palmaville, and Tage Thompson with Zemgus Girgensons, butchered that I bet you, and with Evan Rodriguez. And of course, you got the acquisition of the first pick of Rasmus Dahlin, Rasmus Ristolainen and Marco Scandella. Doan expected to play with Zach Bogosian, Nathan Beaulieu and Jake McCabe, and of course, the free agent signing of Carter Hutton from St. Louis. So, very interesting because the people are kind of looking at the Buffalo Sabres as this sexy team that could make the playoffs this year. And some people are feeling that they might get there. They certainly look on paper to be a lot better of a team. I could grant you that right now they're probably in better shape than the Montreal Canadiens and the Ottawa Senators. But that Eastern Conference is still very tough. You still have your top three, whether you like it or not, with Tampa Bay, Boston, and Toronto. Certainly are not going to go away. They're the top three in their own division there. And you still have Washington, the Stanley Cup champions. It still feels like people forgot that Washington has won the Stanley Cup. But they are the Cup champions. You got the two-time previous Cup champions in that conference, Pittsburgh. You have Columbus. So there's 6 spots that I think are already taken. And you pitch Philadelphia and New Jersey, who made some great strides, and I don't think are going away. And then you also have the New York Islanders with Matthew Barzal, and we'll get to Carolina in a second, but I'm not sure where they're at this point in time. I still think the Buffalo Sabres in the playoffs is a year away. I think that there's certainly some prospects here. There might be a possibility that we can end the fact that Jack Eichel has never played on a team that has with a record of over 500. That might happen. A lot of talent there. I think they need something to come from Sam Reinhart. I think he needs to first round pick in 2018. I think they're hoping that he starts taking some steps. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of that third line of Berglund, Sobotka, and Pominville. They have some pieces. They look like a team that's a little bit more complete, but I still feel that they're a year away. I don't know what the Carolina Hurricanes are. I almost feel like the Carolina Hurricanes are the Calgary Flames of the Eastern Conference. They've made some moves. Of course, they got Dougie Hamilton and Michael Furland. They've got Jeff Skinner out of the way, and they got a number of picks. We are waiting for the trade of Justin Falk. They have a new ownership in Tom Durnan, new head coach in Rod Brindamore. It feels like they're going through a very similar change, even what the Calgary Flames are going through. But I don't know what they are. I don't know if they're in the top. I don't think that they're a playoff team, but I don't know if they're in the bottom echelon yet either. Still waiting to see what exactly the Carolina Hurricanes are. I guess this year will tell us a little bit more about that. But Jeff Skinner, Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart will be an interesting line. Maybe this will be a revival for what Jeff Skinner is. Or maybe we are going to learn something about why Jeff Skinner was traded. Will be interesting. But the Buffalo Sabres are certainly on a lot of people's radar this year in this upcoming 2018-2019 season. You know, there has been a number of stories of dysfunction this year in the offseason. We'll get to one soap opera that is going on the West. But on the East, after a year of when they were one goal away from getting to the Stanley Cup final, the Ottawa Senators had an epic collapse. And it has not changed here in the offseason. Mike Hoffman was traded from Ottawa to San Jose and ended up going to Florida, who was another team that, by the way, in the Eastern Conference, I think is going to be a very interesting team. You still have Erik Karlsson, if he's going to be traded or not. Thought that was going to happen at the trade deadline. Didn't happen. Thought that was going to happen at the draft. Didn't happen. Still waiting to see what's going to happen there. You have an owner in Eugene Melnyk who continuously steps on his toes and when he speaks. You have an arena situation where they want to move the arena downtown because it's in the middle of nowhere. And you also have some players that if you want to play in Ottawa, you want me to play in Ottawa, you're going to have to pay me a heck of a lot more. Mark Stone and Cody Ceci filed for arbitration this week. Mark Stone's asking price was in the $9 million range. That's right, I said $9 million for Mark Stone. They finally did eventually avoid arbitration and agreed to a 1-year, $7.35 million deal. Stone asked for $9 million. The Senators were at $5 million, so they kind of stuck in the middle there. It's not like Mark Stone is considered in a $9 million range, but Mark Stone wanted $9 million to play in Ottawa. Now, I imagine it was because the situation in Ottawa seems dire. That could be. But he's certainly not a guy. He's 26 years old, 62 points in 58 games, 30th place finish. Way that the Senator Pierre Dorion is talking about is he said today's signing Mark Stone is a first step in a process that allows him to continue to negotiate a long-term deal. He has scored 20 goals in his four full NHL seasons, career high 42 assists last year. $7 million is a lot to give a guy like Mark Stone, but we will see. And Cody Ceci is a guy that I think is a really talented guy. I don't think he's a very serviceable and defendable defenseman. They settled for an arbitration, although they were far off. Looks like they have an agreement here. He was awarded Cody Ceci awarded $4.3 million for next season. That's also a lot. Ceci went in, apparently, reports for $6 million. The Senators were combining for $3.35. Countered with $3.35. Sorry, as I pull something up here. This year, it does enable Ceci to become a restricted free agent with arbitration right next summer. 5 goals, 19 points last season. 5th overall by the Senators in 2012. He is a guy that if you're trading Erik Karlsson, Cody Ceci is a guy that you're obviously going to be expecting a lot more once Karlsson is gone. So this is kind of a prove-it deal for Cody Ceci one way or the other. In both cases, though, I wonder what this does if Ottawa wants to move eventually a Cody Ceci or a Mark Stone. Those contracts are pretty hefty, and I don't know a lot of teams will be jumping on that. And it's going to be this is a big year for Ottawa. A lot of people are thinking that they're a 30th place team, and if they're a 30th place team and they win the lottery, that pick is to the Colorado Avalanche because they kept their pick last year for Brady Tkachuk. So they possibly could end up giving up Jack Hughes. That is not out of the realm of possibility. Yeah, the Ottawa Senators are not a playoff team. But this is an example, I think, of having to unfortunately overpay for some people that if I want to play, you want me to play in Ottawa, you're going to have to pay me a hell of a lot more than another organization. The Ottawa Senators are certainly going to be a mess. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the 2018-2019 season. What happens with Erik Karlsson? What do you end up getting for Erik Karlsson? That'll be the big question going on in Ottawa. Maybe with, all this dysfunction and mess, maybe this team will actually unite together. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in Ottawa? But Cody Ceci and Mark Stone, interesting signings, interesting decisions today. You know, there's a number of fan bases in Canada that have had their ups and downs. We talked a little bit earlier about the Calgary Flames, of course, reflecting on the career of Jerome McGinley, and of course the frustrations of Troy Brouwer. We've also talked on the hockey podcast a lot about the Vancouver Canucks and the fan base in regards to the leaving of Trevor Linden. We are going to get into that a little bit later on in the in our podcast. But a team that we haven't touched a lot about out west is the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers, a couple of years ago, made the playoffs for the first time in forever. Made the playoffs for the first time in 10 seasons. They beat the Sharks in 6 games in the first round, lost in 7 to the Anaheim Ducks. Going into the 2017-2018 season, there was a lot of expectations on this team. Some had them even going to the Stanley Cup final. They finished 6th in the Pacific and did not qualify. They had first round, the number 1 pick, Taylor Hall, Nail Yakupov, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and of course Connor McDavid. And still, they have, in this decade from 2010 now, 1 playoff appearance and 13 playoff games. For a number of Oiler fans, it's getting frustrating. And one such fan decided, you know what, I'm going to write a letter to the Edmonton Oilers. I'm going to write and complain about how the Oilers make me feel and how I cannot support them anymore. His name is Brett Barrett. He's on Brett Barrett YEGblog.wordpress.com. Follow him on Brett Barrett YEG. He wrote this letter to the Edmonton Oilers, and the Oilers actually responded to him. I'll just read a little bit of this. April 18th is the anniversary of 2 key dates in my Oilers fandom. In 2015, the Oilers won the draft lottery and were rewarded with the pick to select Connor McDavid. In 2018, just 3 years later, it was the day I chose to no longer support the team I grew up cheering for. Ask any of my friends growing up and they'll tell you, I was a diehard Oilers fan. At least a quarter of my school pictures feature an Oilers jersey. Each spring, when the Oilers faced off with their superior rivals from Dallas, I'd get a buzz cut with an Oilers logo shaved on the back of my head. Every short story we had to write in language arts featured the Oilers in some way. In grade 6, we had to draw a short comic book for some project. Mine ended up being nearly 200 pages of carefully drawn out fiction about Brett Barrett, Oilers captain and NHL superstar. In many ways, my love for the team has defined me to many of my friends and peers. Not anymore, it won't. The team has been bad with a capital B for most of my life, largely because of the EA NHL series of video games. I've always been cognizant of the managerial side of hockey. Let me be clear, in no way do I think being good at video games makes me qualified to be an NHL general manager, but it made me aware of several key factors of team building. The awareness has made watching the Oilers doubly frustrating. Their hockey operations department has made so many head-scratching decisions over the years that a more musical person than might have. Let me reread that sentence again. Their hockey operations department has made so many head-scratching decisions over the years that a more musical person than I might have written a parody of "We Didn't Start the Fire." Bold moves, Mac T challenging Jeff Petrie. You could probably write an entire song just listing the various NHLers whose careers died in blue and orange. A few weeks before the first of those April 18th, I seriously questioned my fandom for the first time. The Oilers had just finished another season where the playoff dream died in October. Craig McTavish traded Jeff Petrie at the trade deadline, then held an unbelievable press conference where he expressed confidence going forward with the defense core of Oscar Klefbom, Justin Schultz, Nikita Nikitin, Andrew Ferentz, and Mark Fane. By the way, the only one that is on that roster right now is Oscar Klefbom. only one of those two is to the NHL, and one being a rookie, and at the time, and the other being pre-Pittsburgh, Justin Schultz. By the way, some considered for the Norris. Let's go on here. Then they won the Connor McDavid lottery. My Oilers were finally going to be good. Never mind longing for the days of Wayne Gretzky. I was getting my own generational superstar in Edmonton. Much like the oft compared to Chicago Blackhawks when Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane arrived, the Oilers had pieces in place to supplement McDavid. This wasn't like the arrival of Taylor Hall in 2010, what the core pieces were Sam Callante, Sean Horkoff, and Ladislav Schmid. This was a core of Hall, Doan, Hall, my words, no longer there. Jordan Eberle, my words, no longer there. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, still there. And Clefbaum, soon to be supplemented by Leon Draisaitl and Darnell Nurse, and 3 more top 60 picks in a really good 2015 draft. Then he goes on. Over the next 3 years, Chiarelli decided Griffin Reinhart, Adam Larsson, Milan Lucic, Chris Russell, and Ryan Strome were the guys he wanted. To recap, that's a slow skating defensive defenseman who is not, and likely never will become an everyday NHL player. A good second pairing defenseman with good defensive awareness but limited offense. Traded, by the way, for an MVP of the National Hockey League. A 30-year-old power forward, a third pairing defenseman who can't make a good first pass, and a third line center who consistently scores 30-something points and doesn't win playoffs. With the exception of Reinhart, all are NHL players. None are stars, though, and unfortunately, in acquiring and keeping those guys, Chiarelli lost 3 stars. Matt pick 16 Barzal, Taylor Hall, and Jordan Eberle were traded for Reinhart, Larson, and Strome, respectively. Making matters worse, Russell was added because Reinhart couldn't make the trade, and the Eberle trade was made in order to sign Russell long-term. Connor McDavid is basically a real-life cheat code, yet the Oilers still couldn't score when he wasn't on the ice. Turns out intentionally reducing your team's offensive output is a bad idea. How could anyone have known unless they have somehow figured out that you need to score more goals than other teams to win a hockey game? Peter Chiarelli is unable to build a good hockey team. He is the latest in a decade-long line of poor GMs making poor decisions. And after Chiarelli's and Nicholson's embarrassing end of the season press conference, I was done. Having decided to end my fandom, I'm not reading the entire thing, I'm just pointing out some highlights here. I wrote a breakup letter to the Oilers organization. This team no longer makes me happy. My mental health is very often worse for being a fan of this organization. Watching games became a burden, and watching teams like Winnipeg and Toronto succeed was a reminder of what could have been. I ended up writing another copy of that letter with less swearing and stream of conscious narration and mailed it to the organization. I outlined some of the poor, in brackets, read, dumb choices the organization has made and why I can no longer support the team in good faith. The letter was dated April 18th, 2018, 3 years to the day when the future seemed irrepressibly bright. I mailed the letter, packed my jerseys and memorabilia into a box, no small feat, I had a lot of Oilers crap, and gave the box to my parents. I began looking for the new team to cheer for. I forgot about the letter. 2 months later, I received a reply. It was signed by Nicholson, but I'm fairly confident it's a foreign letter someone else in the organization wrote to send to a growing number of disillusioned fans. I'll read it. Dear Mr. Barrett, the Edmonton Oilers are extremely proud to have such passionate and knowledgeable fans. We don't take that kind of loyalty and support for the team for granted. Specifically to your letter, I want to thank you for taking the time to communicate your thoughts, and I would like to let you know that we at the Oilers share in your vision and continued improvement for the team. It's no surprise that we too were so disappointed in the outcome of the season and recognize the need of progress moving forward. I can tell you I work with Peter day in and day out, and he's working tirelessly to improve the team, as you hopefully seen with some of our off-season moves to refresh the coaching staff, by the way, Glenn Gullison, and focus on some players needed for the upcoming season. As Peter mentioned in his recent interview during the NHL Scouting Combine, we know what success feels like, and while we experience failures this past season, those missteps are just as invaluable as we learn and build for them. We don't believe that there's a need to do anything too drastic, as we've worked hard to greatly improve our depth over the past couple of years. Having said that, we do recognize there are still some holes to fill. I'm confident we got some good young players coming up, and I think Peter's commitment to bring in further depth than to the team was showcased with the recent signings of Finnish goalie Mikko Koskinen and the signing of forward Patrick Russell, who represented Denmark at the 2018 World Hockey Championship last month. Together with Peter, Todd, and our new assistant coaching staff, we share in the common goal of not only making the playoffs this season, but being a Stanley Cup contender year in and year out. While I understand your critical eye, Peter has full faith and support as we continue on this path. Sincerely, Bob Nicholson, CEO and Vice Chair. Let me read his response quickly. In the letter, the author touts their belief in, air quotes, Peter's plan and points to 2 moves that will help the organization improve. Those moves: re-signing a 25-year-old minor leaguer with 44 points in 2 AHL seasons, and signing a shiny new backup goaltender who makes far too much money. Problem solved. I have no doubt the Oilers will be better this season than they were in 2017-2018. It'd be almost impossible not to be. But heading into year 4 of the McDavid Oilers, hoping to be a playoff team, is downright unacceptable. This team should be a legitimate cup contender, not just a playoff maybe. Returning to my earlier comparison to the Blackhawks, this team was a contender in year 2 and won 2 cups in the first 6 years. Anyone else sort of doubt the Oilers win 2 of the next 3 cups? There is a relationship between fan and a sports club. An implicit contract where we support the team our time and money, and it provides an exciting and winning product. In 2010, this franchise asked for patience while they rebuilt the team into one that could win a Stanley Cup. Stick with us. It'll be worth it in a few years. 8 years later, the few worthwhile parts of the Edmonton Oilers were earned through futility and good luck, not through the efforts of management. It's not a simple thing to end a lifelong association, but direction this franchise has headed has made it an easy choice. The key decisions made over the past 3 years by Shirley have, to be frank, not worked out. I'm not an NHL general manager, nor have I ever been. Despite that, I have never needed the benefit of hindsight to be critical of Mr. Shirley's future moves. These moves seriously damaged the team's ability to ice a competitive team in 2017 and beyond. The Oilers have been like a childhood friend to me, but now it's like that once close friend who made too many bad life decisions and continually refused help, to the point where the only sensible course of action is to cease being friends with them. That's that for that. I'll post this in the podcast link if you want to read this as well. But it's very interesting to hear this, and it's from a fan perspective. I can't really blame him. Let's look at this from the outside Oiler world. Let's look at this from where I am here in Vancouver, who is consistently frustrated that they have never had a first pick. Never had a first pick. And yet you look at the prospect pool in Vancouver that people are talking about. We'll get into this a little bit later. Did they get Rasmus Dahlin? No, they got Quinn Hughes. Very exciting defenseman. You got Elias Pettersson. It's very exciting. You got Brock Besser. Some excitement. Other than Connor McDavid and maybe Leon Draisaitl, what specifically can you be excited about the Edmonton Oilers? They sent cards, letters. They sent Valentines. They went schmoozing. They did everything they possibly could to sign a guy named Milan Lucic a couple of years ago during that Brouwer-Eriksson oversign. That was an oversign. And that's proven. Now they can't get this guy out, really. The Edmonton Oilers, for the opportunity that they have been given, and, a silver platter opportunity. Number 1 picks, Taylor Hall, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Nail Yakupov, a 7th pick named Darnell Nurse, Connor McDavid, who is not number one in the league, probably number 2 or 3 in your terms of your players. And this team still couldn't make the playoffs last year. Yeah, this is a team that people expected to get to the finals. I can't blame him for writing this letter. I can't blame him for feeling frustrated. I can't imagine that if you're an Oilers fan, you're feeling a lot of hope. They're very dangerously close to being passed by the Vancouver Canucks, especially in terms of prospects. There's some really, we'll get into this in a little bit in one of our next topics here, but the Vancouver Canucks, in terms of prospects, are in better shape right now than the Edmonton Oilers. And there's going to be a point, and you're going to think that I'm being ridiculous when I say this, but you have to wonder how long Connor McDavid is going to put up with this. It is not easy. We've talked about this in a couple of other podcasts, but it is not easy to be a superstar in the National Hockey League, specifically in Canada. It is tough. You look at how the Winnipeg Jets have run their team. They don't really, even Patrick Laine, although he's a marquee name, he's not in a position of superstardom. He's not that face. It is very, very hard, and it's going to start wearing on him. And if this Oiler team doesn't turn around within the next couple of seasons, will Connor McDavid ask for a trade? I'm just going to put that out there. I know that some of you may think that I'm being ridiculous, but a part of me may not be surprised if that happens. The Oilers built a new arena. It's a fantastic new arena downtown. Now, you can't get through the LRT. It takes forever. But it's a fantastic new arena. Looks very beautiful. Changed the landscape of downtown Edmonton. But this team needs to start performing very quickly. I would suggest that other than the Leafs, because they have the acquisition of John Tavares, and maybe the Jets because they had high expectations, the Edmonton Oilers have the third most pressure to perform out of all of the teams in Canada. I think that there should be high expectations of where this Oilers team is. If they don't make the playoffs this year, there are going to be some very serious questions. I even think that there'll be some serious questions about this team if they don't win a round in the playoffs. That's how high I think expectations are in Edmonton right now. Very interesting to see what is going to happen there. Speaking of prospects and speaking of being in a Canadian market, what a soap opera is going on in Vancouver. You have Trevor and Jim and Quinn and Francesco and so many more. And John even is in there too. Let's recap. Of course, Trevor Linden was let go, depending on your perspective. Amicably was the word. We are learning that it was certainly not amicable, depending on your perspective. That Trevor Linden left last Wednesday, the Vancouver Canucks, as president. We haven't heard from Trevor Linden. We haven't heard from Francesco Aquilini. We did hear at a conference from Jim Benning and Travis Green. But there have been reports on a number of different sides of what's happened. There was a report out written by Steve Simmons in the Toronto Sun that basically Jim Benning and John Weisbrod, assistant GM, backstabbed Trevor Linden. And one station has kind of ran with that, and another station went and interviewed Jim Benning, and Benning denied it. Then there was the question of Quinn. Quinn is here in Kamloops for the summer showcase. Quinn is turning heads along with his brother Jack. And Quinn has decided last week that he was going to stay in Michigan and not play for the Vancouver Canucks this upcoming season. Quinn was asked, was it because of Trevor leaving that you're not coming? What's the reason, Quinn? What's going on? And Francesco, why are you not talking? Trevor, why are you not talking? Jim and John, are you villains? It all feels a little bit like this. big, fat soap opera that, quite frankly, just needs to go. This has been pounded to the ground here in the Vancouver area for the last week and a half. And I have gotten on Toronto media and ranted a little bit about how this Kawhi Leonard and John Tavares and how they keep stories going and going and going. And I'm sure there's been a ton of feedback. I'm not going to dispute that there's been a ton of feedback. This story has got to stop. We will not know until Trevor Linden talks what exactly happened. And Trevor Linden may never speak about this ever. And by the way, that is his right. It is his right what he wants to share or not share. I think he's trying to be as respectful as possible to the Vancouver Canuck organization. Very clear that how this was handled from the Canuck organization into PR mode was terrible. No one is going to ever argue that. Yes, Francesco Aquilini should have had a press conference. No one is ever going to argue that. But we'll never know the answer. And this is a story that just needs, for now, to die. It is being pounded to the ground by both sports stations. Enough. End it. Move on. My God. And it's getting a bit ridiculous. And it gets a bit more ridiculous when you start hearing about Quinn Hughes. Again, he is turning heads at this World Junior Summer Showcase out here at Kamloops. Probably, between him and Jack, probably the two best players out. The guys that everyone is paying attention to. And if you've seen the highlights or if you've been at the games, you've seen what Quinn Hughes can do. It is magnificent. There's no question about it. This guy's a first-rate talent. But comparing him to Bobby Orr, really? We're going to do this to an 18-year-old kid? Bobby Orr is not one, if not in some people's mind, one. Some people's mind, two, number 3, 4, is probably in many people's top 5 or 6 players that has ever played this game of hockey. He's the best defenseman that has ever played this game of hockey. And he played this at the National Hockey League. To even put Quinn Hughes in the Bobby Orr realm is ridiculous. Ridiculous. This is a fun little tournament, but this isn't even the World Junior Championship. So he's not even at that level yet. Calm down with the expectations of Quinn Hughes. This does nothing to help anybody. Owners that did this with Vincent Lecavalier, when he was picked in the first round, they compared him, they called him the Michael Jordan of hockey. They do this with young people. You compare them to other people. There needs to be a ban. From this point on, as of this point, 43 minutes into this podcast, I'm going to say this. Thou shalt not compare future stars in the NHL to NHL legends like Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, or more. It stops. No more. It is ridiculous. Yes, maybe he has some similar playing abilities, but to even put in the same realm, even in the same sentence at this point in time, is utterly ridiculous. And it only puts more pressure on a player and raises unnecessary expectations on someone. You watch how tonight's going to go, or you watch how it's going to happen with Johnny Manziel. The expectations even on that guy right now is ridiculous. He's had 4 practices, he knows 9 plays, and people are expecting him to throw 300 yards. Stop with these ridiculous comparisons and expectations. Let a player learn and develop his craft and be the best. Let's, at the end of the day, say Quinn Hughes is going to be Quinn Hughes. And whatever that turns out is going to be great. Thank you for that. Lots of talk this week, of course, about Jarome Iginla and his legacy with the Calgary Flames. A fellow Kamloops Blazer also had an interesting announcement this week. Shane Doan will have his jersey retired as an Arizona/Phoenix Coyote in a February game against the Winnipeg Jets, his number 19 jersey. Iginla and Doan have some very similar stats or career numbers in terms of, not career numbers, but in terms of playing amount. Iginla certainly was more dominant than Shane Doan. But Shane Doan has been a very valuable member of the National Hockey League community. He's unique in the fact that he played his entire career with one team. Not many have done that, but he did. And of course, it's with the Arizona Coyotes, not exactly the sexiest team in the National Hockey League. They've only won 2 playoff series since moving to the desert. Can you blame Doan for that? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. In terms of you can talk. He never topped 80 points in a season. He only scored more than 30 goals twice in his career. And those things might go against him. But I would like to say that Shane Doan should be in the Hall of Fame. Certainly, you talk to the people here in Kamloops, he's been nothing but a tremendous presence. Part owner of the Kamloops Blazers down the hill here. Played for one team. He stayed loyal in a time when a lot of other people would have left. He did amass 1,000 career points. It's not all about points, but I think it's about his presence and his dedication to hockey in the Arizona community. Think about this. Without Shane Doan, is there an Austin Matthews? Austin Matthews is from Arizona. He's developed the game of hockey in that land. And it's been a tough grind, of course. We all see the empty seats there. But Shane Doan traveled that out. So, for me, I would like to see Shane Doan in the Hall of Fame. Is he going to be in the Hall of Fame in 2020, 2021? Probably not. It will probably take a few years. But I do think the argument of Shane Doan being in the Hall of Fame is a valid one. And I would like to give that out there, give that shout out. So let's leave it there. What do you think? Shane Doan, a Hall of Famer? Is Jeff Skinner going to help the Buffalo Sabres? Troy Brouwer going to get a player contract? Can we put an end to the Jim Benning, Trevor Linden, Francisco Aquilini soap opera? Would you write a letter to your team if they started to struggle or suck and leave them? Let me know. Follow me at KEVOLE and at Podcast Hockey. Like the Hockey Podcast on Facebook. Spreaker.com, KEVOLE. Soundcloud.com, KEVOLE. Thanks very much for listening to the Hockey Podcast, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.